Hello everybody. This is a panel for Pride Cymru's virtual Big Week. Nice long title there. And it's a panel on hate crime of all kinds, something that we don't talk about enough within the community. But hate crime encompassing everything from street attacks to domestic violence and hate speech as well. We have a number of people here to talk about that from personal experience and from the helping agencies. My name's Lisa Power, and I'm just here to direct traffic. So on behalf of the organisers, let's hear from each of the people who are on the panel, starting with Jenny Ann.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny Ann Bishop from the Unique Transgender Network in North Wales. I've worked on hate crime projects, including the All Wales Hate Crime Research Project. And I'm also on the Parliamentary Forum on Gender Identity, where policing crime and hate crime are featured every session. Thank you.
Okay, Trudy?
Hello, my name's Trudy Pease. I work for Victim Support as the Hate Crime Training and Engagement Officer for North Wales. We also have training and engagement officers in Dyfed Powys and in Gwent and South Wales as well. So there's 3 of us doing the role across North Wales. So I work with groups and organisations delivering training and attending meetings and events with the main aim of raising awareness about hate crime and making sure that people know how to report it and how to get support. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
My name is Chris. I'm from Cardiff. LGBTQ. I'm here to represent the Deaf Hub.
Thank you. And I should say, Debbie, Olivia, do you want to speak as well?
Well, this was a very late booking last night, so this is all new for me. And I'm just interpreting here and help the conversation run smoothly, hopefully.
Yes, there was a last-minute change, and we apologise for the lateness, but it's great to have you here helping. Rahim?
Hello, my name is Rahim. I'm originally from Morocco, but I live here in Wales for 3 years now. I'm an asylum seeker here in the UK. I'm part of Glitter Cymru. I'm part of the Glitter Cymru. Glitter Cymru is a BME social group to help amplify the voices of the community and to make sure that the community is integrated within the society and have access to all the possible services in society. I'm also part of Pride Cymru. I'm the BME outreach officer within Pride Cymru, and also part of Fast Track to reduce stigma and discrimination against HIV/AIDS.
Thank you. Debbie?
Hi, well, I'm Debbie Lane. I'm the CEO of the LGBT Cymru helpline and counselling service. So we work very much with the community. We do a lot of Zoom counselling and support as well at the moment. So it's made us sort of into near experts, if you like, of technology with Zoom and Microsoft Teams, but I'm still learning, I have to say. So we help and support people that have experienced hate crime, domestic violence with professional qualified counsellors. We also do support buddying as well with people that have experienced hate crime. So that's not a qualified counsellor, but it's kind of a support buddy that they can go for a cup of coffee with, or at the moment they're sort of doing social distancing walks and things like that with people. We also help and support asylum seekers in the sort of process that can be very, let's just say, stressful and anxious for them, and also help them with counselling and support for the crimes and discrimination that they've suffered in the countries that they've come from. So a kind of a mixed bag, if you like, of different types of support.
And Marios?
Hi there, PC Dixon, South Wales Police, first name Marios, you can call me Mario. So I'm a hate crime officer for South Wales Police. I've been in the role since January, but I've worked for South Wales Police since 2008. I'm also an openly gay member of staff, South Wales Police. I'm on the South Wales Police LGBT network. I'm one of the exec members on the network. So I've done a lot with Pride Cymru over the years, with Pride and different events. That's me.
And of course, there's also been issues for Pride Cymru in terms of hate crimes, but maybe we'll get onto that later if anybody has experience of that. If not, I'm sure that we can talk about a whole range of things. It would be good to start, if people don't mind, with people's experiences. And I know that some of you have come onto the panel and are happy to talk about your own experiences of hate crime. Does anybody feel like starting? Go ahead, Jenny.
Yes, thank you. I've suffered from a number of hate crimes over the years, and I've made a few videos with people like Race Equality First, with the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and with North Wales Police in promoting, reporting and proper judicial prosecution of hate crime. I used to live in Cheshire before I moved to North Wales about 12, 13 years ago. And I have to say, the hate crime I suffered there was awful. When I transitioned, people messed with my car almost every night. It got bumped or scratched. They used a penknife to put tranny all down one side of the car. Somebody painted on the end of the house, "The trannies live here." Somebody else tried to set the house on fire. They tried to knock down the door to come and attack us. Unfortunately, we survived all of those. I have to say, Cheshire Police were very helpful. Well, quite often when I came home, there'd be an officer around to make sure I could get into the house safely. And in the end, I decided I needed to live somewhere else and came to live in Wales. And I think the big difference was I came to live in Wales as Jenny Ann rather than transitioning. And I've had very few problems locally. The problems I've had since then were abuse at a railway station in Hampshire. And I have to say, the Hampshire police dealt with that very well. And when I got home, one of my friends from Victim Support rang and said, "What are you doing on the system, Jenny Ann? Have you really had a hate crime?" And they were very supportive. But the system failed me because the police and the CPS, although they were prosecuting the crime, didn't bring it to court till it ran out of time. So I didn't feel very happy with that result. The next incident we had was because we run a helpline, we had a very abusive caller call us who was ringing the number 10 or 20 times a day. And we worked with North Wales Police to set up monitoring, and eventually we thought we knew who it was, and the police and BT tracked down the person, and it was who we thought it was. And we found out that the person was trans themselves, and it was a sort of cry for help. So with North Wales Police's help, we went through a restorative justice process, and the person came a couple of times to our support group in Manchester and was helped. So I think sometimes you need to stand back and look at the whole thing in the round. Those are the ones I particularly suffered from. One of the other things we find from members of the community is sometimes the impact of hate crime is so serious that they don't seem to be able to get over it. We've got somebody in our group who rings me regularly and goes over and over an incident that happened almost 10 years ago. And in spite of all sorts of support, she still needs to regularly ring us and just pour out her heart while I listen. So there isn't always resolution, but there does need to be that support. So I particularly like what was said earlier about buddying with people, and that's part of what Unique does. I've got some stuff I'd like to say later about the whole process and how we can make it better, but I've probably talked enough, Lisa.
Well, I also would like us to talk a bit more about restorative justice as well, as an alternative to police action sometimes, or, you know, as a result of these crimes. Chris, could we hear about what happens within the deaf community or your personal experiences?
Have a drink first before I start talking. Hang on. Better. I can talk now. Sorry, Chris. Sorry. It's hard in the deaf community, especially if you're gay. I've recognised a lot of transgender people who are deaf, and they've had abuse. I feel in Cardiff there isn't enough support, I'm afraid. You know, people abuse you, and there's people in the street that do it. And there's no support from the police. That's my view.
Trudy, you talked earlier before we came on air about having some personal experience. Would you like to speak now?
Yes. I had an experience some years ago. It wasn't actually in North Wales, but what happened was I had two teenage daughters who went to the local secondary school. And one morning they went out to school and came straight back in, very upset, crying, distraught. What they'd actually seen was a symbol that had been spray painted onto our front door. And if we'd have gone out, we would have noticed the symbol, but we wouldn't have understood what it meant. But they realised that it was a symbol of a local gang that was homophobic, racist. So obviously they were, really upset about that. And I think, the impact of that, it doesn't sound very much having something spray painted on your front door, but the impact of that, not knowing who's out there, not knowing who's done that, not knowing if anybody's watching you, actually has a massive impact on somebody's mental health, because, it can make somebody very paranoid. So I used to get up and jump up to the window whenever I heard a noise. We were same-sex partners, so me and my partner tried to conceal our identity. We didn't hold hands when we went out very much, because we were aware of homophobic attitudes and we'd got our children to think of. But when we were out walking in the countryside, we would kind of hold hands and be a little bit more affectionate, but we stopped that. We put our house on the market and eventually moved. And of course, there was the ripple effect with that as well. We actually had same-sex neighbours living next door. And at first, they weren't very concerned. They'd never really experienced hate crime themselves. So they weren't too worried until they realised that their son was due to go up to the same school as my girls in the September. And of course, there was kind of, the ripple effect on the community. The whole community experienced fear fear and vulnerability when another minority group experiences hate crime, I think. And that can ripple effect can spread for miles and miles. There was a case a couple of years ago of to a lesbian couple on a London bus, and a group of people asked them to kiss, and when they refused to kiss for the group of people, they were physically assaulted. And even though that was in London and I was living in North Wales, that had quite an impact on me at the time. So I think we kind of have to think about it's the impact on the victim that is the real issue, because it's not like a usual crime. This is about an attack on somebody's identity, and I think that's where it's so impactful. And of course, there are also financial impacts as well. So in our case, we had to get our front door professionally. You can't just paint over the paint that is often used in these kind of things. They use special paint. And so we had to get our front door professionally painted and sorted. But obviously, those emotional impacts are the things that actually stay with you.
And of course, sometimes hate crime can be more complex than just about our LGBT identity, as Chris has experienced, and as Rahim, I know you've experienced very complex hate crime, both in your country of origin and in Wales.
Yeah, I mean, it is, to be honest with you, I am so astonished that we are having this conversation about hate crime, because a lot of asylum seekers from the LGBT community are running away from the hate crime to come here and finding out another version of that hate crime, whether from the Islamophobia, because most of us are Muslims, or we look like Muslims, so we are profiled as Muslims, or from the Sub-Sahara, which is the black community, who are sometimes racially profiled and stripped from their queerness. So yeah, and there is also the microaggressions as well that we should also mention. So when I came here the first time in 2017, and like I said, I ran away from hate crime and from people who have the ideologies and the culture that gay people are now welcome, or the whole LGBT community is now welcome. So when I come here, the first thing that the Home Office did was putting me in what's called a hostel filled with people that I ran away from, So instead of like, I was excited to come to the UK just to flag and to wave my rainbow, finding myself with people, 5 people in the same room that I share with to sleep, and finding myself like going back to the closet, but not going back to the closet, but even like the extreme closet. At least in my country, I had my own space and I could be as gay as I want in that space. But here, finding out that I have to go back even extremely to the closet. And when I moved to the sharing house, which is managed by Clear Spring and Reading Home here, the same thing happened. And when I asked for is there any special housing for the LGBT community, and they said, no, we don't do such thing. So for 6 months, I find myself closing my room in myself. I couldn't leave the room, and I couldn't have like even interactions with the house, the people who lives with me, because I was afraid that they're gonna find out that I was gay, and I was not prepared for the reaction, because I was living with a Kurdish, with an Iranian, with an Albanian, and without no means that I'm suggesting that they are homophobes. But I don't want to test the water, because it's going to be, it's going to be, my life was going to be in risk. And for sure, like I always heard conversation about, because well, maybe they find out that I was gay, and I was always hearing conversation in the kitchen about how gays are bad, how gays are the problem of the disease. So that really created anxiety for me. And because And so yeah, that the conversation was always we always had the conversation about Clear Spring to create a house or like housing, especially for the LGBT community. But what is touching with me, like I said, I'm part of Glitter Cymru, and we have a lot of attendees who are asylum seekers, and we just learned that a trans man was put in a shared house with cis Middle Eastern and sub-Saharan countries men, which is really crazy. And when we asked Clear Spring, and they said, oh, actually, we don't provide any special services for the trans community or the LGBT community as a whole. And that was scary for me. But to be honest with you, but the most macro aggression that I had, and it's still stuck with me, is with the police. With the police of South Wales coming to my door and knocking at 12 p.m. asking if I had knives in my house. And when I asked why, and they said, yeah, because the crimes in your area, in my area, are rising up. The crime rates in my area are rising up, and it was shocking to me because I never had any interaction with the confrontation with the police. I never had any problems in the area. All my housemates are like very nice. They are really quiet. They never made any trouble or something like that. So it was really scary for me to see the police showing up on my door with the house manager, I might add. And to me, that's a direct racial profiling. Because our house is very, like, it's asylum seekers' house, so we are BME. So that's a racial profiling from the South Wales, and that really scared me because somehow I lost the confidence on the police. Even if I had, because I have a lot of, I hear a lot of slurs when I go to City Road because maybe the way I walk or something like that. From the community. So sometimes I feel, oh, should I go to the police and report that, or I will be put down and let down because of what happened when the police showed up on my door and asked me for if I had knives, and from the victim to become a criminal because I saw that in my country. So that trust was lost. So, well, yeah. And also, my friends in Glitter who are from the Black community, they are constantly racially profiled and stopped by the police. So this is a little bit daunting.
Okay, we've had two contributions now that have talked about concerns about the police. So I think it's fair to give Mario the mic for a minute to respond to some of that, because I think it is important that we are able to trust someone if we experience hate crimes, and clearly that isn't always the case.
Yeah, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I've got involved in Pride for probably the last 10 years. I can only give my experience, and that's obviously what Chris and Raheem have formed their, understanding of who the police are, what the police do. It is sad to hear stories like that because, again, from my experience working internally, things are a lot better than I think the general public would think. They would probably think that openly gay member of staff would have a hard time, or they wouldn't fit in, or that's never been my experience. Again, I don't know the individual circumstances with what's happened to Chris or why the police turned up at Raheem's door. I don't know what information, intelligence, or what had been reported to mean that the police had to go to that door, to knock that door. It is very difficult for the police to do the right thing in all circumstances. Obviously, you need to protect the public or need to act on the information that is provided. But then on the other hand, I get that one small experience that probably is insignificant to that officer who's gone to that door that night. Raheem is still here recounting that experience and reliving it months, years later. All I can say is my number, I've already provided my number to Pride Cymru. So at the end of this video, my understanding is my details are going to be provided to anyone that wants to watch. Get in contact with me. You know, if, for example, the deaf community aren't feeling that there's a way to report things, you know, I know that there are text services or other ways that you can get in contact, but I need to highlight that obviously I'm not on duty all day and night. So if you text me or try calling and I'm not available, it's because I'm off duty. Obviously 999, that's what it's there for. And I know that there is a service there for the deaf community to text through. But yeah, I would encourage anyone that needs advice or information to get in contact with me. That's what my role is. So we're an enhanced service. So just anyone reporting antisocial behaviour, being assaulted, whatever it is, they get the normal police service, and that you know is decided between the Crown Prosecution Service and the police and the government. But I'm an additional layer for our communities. So whether it's LGBT, whether it's race, disability, the trans community, I'm there to provide an enhanced service. So any time anyone wants advice or information, contact me. Or if you want me to go over, have a look at an incident in the past that you feel that you've been hard done by, or you know wasn't right, you know, do get in contact with me. I'll have a look. I'll see. I won't be able to give everyone the answer they want, because unfortunately sometimes it just doesn't work that everyone gets exactly what they want for certain reasons. There are limitations, but yeah, by all means, please do get in contact with me. And yeah.
Okay, Rahim, I can see you want to.
I just want to ask a question, because you talked about intelligence and you talked about different ways to prevent crime. And I want to ask you, is the police of South Wales have trainings to prevent racial profiling?
Yeah, obviously Stop and Search and other things have had a lot of media coverage, and quite rightly, where there's media coverage or where there's complaint or where there's issues being highlighted or communities feel targeted, there is training, there is it's a very hard balancing act of acting on the information you've got. Again, I can't discuss incidents individually because I don't know, I wasn't involved in them. But yeah, there is training. I'm
not either, by the way.
Yeah, there is training.
Okay, and that rather neatly takes us into what can be done if people experience hate crime. It's good to hear that there is liaison still, because as somebody who's come to Wales from England, I know that the Metropolitan Police, for example, have really lost most of their liaison officers. And I always found it absolutely invaluable from an agency that helped people in trouble with the law sometimes, to be able to go to a liaison officer who understood, in the case of the work I was doing, understood HIV, but also understands LGBT issues. But I think, you know, more learning can never be a bad thing. So let's hear about the support services that people do provide, because I'm sure there are people listening to this who may already or in the future be in need of those services. Debbie, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got any personal experience, but we do receive a lot of calls where people are very scared, frightened, petrified in some circumstances to even leave their house, you know, where they've made themselves housebound. We support them with, you know, counselling, but also we do signpost as well. And so we do have contacts, like with the hate crime officers, for example, which we work with and worked with very successfully, I would say, over the years, because the helpline's been going since 2004. One of the main issues seems to be that when we get the calls, that they don't want to go to the police. It could be for a few reasons, really. One, because they don't want to become a victim again, because it's like the fear of the fear. I'm not saying the police would treat it, in the wrong way at all, but there's that instant fear of being discriminated against again. So what we can do, we can gain their confidence by then, myself or one of the volunteers making a phone call to our contact officer, then, if you like, the hate crime officer, have a conversation with them to then connect them up, to support them, and whether they need a support buddy or whether they need a qualified, counselling sessions, then we provide that. Just for people to know that we are a charity. And if people are unemployed, for example, they don't have to pay for the counselling service at all. There's no limit to the counselling sessions either. And if somebody is working and has income and can afford a £10 contribution per session, then that's all we charge. So when I'm sort of talking about the counselling service, please don't think that I'm talking about £50, £70 an hour. Most of the clients we have are all free of charge anyway, because they just haven't got the money to gain private access to the mental health system. But there's a lot of work we do in the background, again, with asylum seekers. It was interesting what Raheem said about, LGBT people being put in a home office house whilst they're going through the process. And I've had to deal with people that were urinating and excreting against their windows, bedroom windows that happen to be outward facing. They take their food out of the fridge, and then bear in mind, what asylum seekers have to live on is very, very little. So every piece of food it is very much valued, and putting it in the bin, amongst other rubbish, so that they can't eat their food. What I have, because they also tend to be quite frightened of the police as well getting involved, because they think it's going to affect their application and all that if they make complaints, and they're fearful of being killed, really, by these people that live in the same house as them. So I tend to contact the house manager to deal with the homophobia. That seems to, so far, it seems to be a better way of dealing with it. The homophobia that goes on within the asylum seekers' household. Maybe Raheem might want to make further comment on that, because I'm all for ideas, really, when I'm dealing with these issues, to try and support asylum seekers. But that's the way I've found the better way. I can't say it's the best way, but the better way to deal with the homophobia and the hate crime, rather than getting police involved in crime numbers and things like that. Because you've got to remember, these people have come from countries where they've been attempted murder, where a lot of them have scars on their body from the abuse, and all this type of honour, which I hate this phrase, honour-based killings and things going on. There's no honour in it whatsoever. It's an absolute disgrace. They're fearful of authority. So for those that do have internet access, or they go through different charities, they can be signposted to us. And we are there to help. And I think Raheem knows that we've helped a few people, because I know that I've met him on one occasion. We've had a discussion. And I also give support in the leading up to the immigration, if the applications are not successful, first of all, and they have to go through an appeal process, that we, as a counselling service and a buddying service, we help them with the lead up to the appeal hearing, because quite often they're physically sick in the car with me when I'm taking them to the immigration appeal tribunal, because they're just so petrified of going back to what they've been subjected to. So there's those types of things that we do in supporting people. But I think the signposting that we do with the police has been quite successful, I would say. There's certain areas which I've always found, by the way, South Wales Police to be very helpful. I just want to get that in. And they've helped a lot of our callers that have been in great need with hate crime, including because we've got all this social media now with things like Grindr and things like that, where people have never met people and they invite them to their house and then they get beaten up in their house. And because they are not out to their families or, their friends, they then find themselves in a position where they need to go to the police. So they kind of ring the helpline first for that support then, so we can connect them up and reassure them with a hate crime officer, so that they're not so fearful, because they might have had their wallet stolen, whether it was wallet, leather jacket, there was all sorts of things. One man, this is quite a few years ago now, when he invited somebody to his house, not only was he beaten up and robbed, he was actually literally stripped naked and put out on the street, and the house lights up. So he was running around the street naked, obviously badly beaten, trying to get help, which a lot of people were just running away from him rather than helping him. So lots of horrific types of hate crime. And with social media, I can only say that it's probably increased the hate crime. And I would say particularly in trans areas, we're helping a lot of, probably 75% of our clients at the moment, if not 85%, are trans clients, where they're suffering, or suffer of hate crime or abuse or rejection. That we deal with a lot of trans families where trans persons come out to their family and going through that rejection. Also, it's not all about rejection. It can be about acceptance as well from the family issue. So we help with a systemic sort of therapy, group therapy approach to help the family. So that's the mum, dad, or the guardians, the brothers, the sisters, or whatever, because they all have their own individual thoughts and feelings, but to help them come together as a family. So we do trans family therapy as well, which I have to say is working very well with our very dedicated counsellors. Just like to add that most of our counsellors come from the LGBT community. And one of the things I want to advocate, or take the opportunity of advocating here, it's LGBT plus and allies, because we wouldn't be where we are today without our allies, certainly with the laws that we have that have helped us get there. So what we say is, as long as you're not transphobic, homophobic or biphobic, you're welcome to access our counselling services, because that's our way then from the LGBT plus community of giving back to our allies that have helped us. And we are there, helping and supporting not just LGBT plus people, but also heterosexual. We have heterosexual clients as well that suffer hate crime.
I'm going to break in here because you talked a bit about the particular problems that the trans community are facing at the moment.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to bring Jenny Ann back in here, because there is a real wave of online hatred against trans people, which seems to be translating into crime at the moment and violence.
Yeah.
Jenny Ann?
Yes, I'd agree with that. It's partly because of the way the Westminster government have acted in terms of the revisions to the GRA and for redefining the guidance for the Equality Act. That seems to have really unleashed a complete storm of transphobic hate online, and some of it is hate crime. And as I understand it, that can be separately prosecuted under the Malicious Communications Act rather than under the Criminal Justice Act, but people don't seem to use that very often. What it's also meant is it seems to have said to people who are homophobic, transphobic particularly, or biphobic, and lots of people who are racist, that it's okay to be that way, and it's almost empowered them to come out and be much more transphobic, homophobic, biphobic. And what we have seen in North Wales is that the hate crime figures have steadily risen. Fortunately, our area is better than many across Wales. Our force's objective is to make it the safest area in the UK, which is a wonderful target to try and reach. And what I wanted to say is I think we can help things by all working together. We're very lucky. We have regular meetings both as an LGBT community and as a trans community with our police force. Members of the community train all new officers in diversity. So over the years, and we've been doing that for over 18 years now, we've got to a point where sometimes members of the community will say to me, I got stopped by the police for perhaps a motoring offence, and it was annoying being stopped, but the officer was so understanding that I was trans or gay, it was almost worth getting the ticket, which is wonderful. And the other thing we have, I think you have one down in the south as well, we have a CPS hate crime scrutiny panel, so that regularly we look at real cases, how they've been dealt with by the police, by the CPS and by the judiciary. And the CPS, right after each session, lessons to be learned, and we see them being implemented. And one of the areas I think does need to be implemented is better training for the judiciary, who too often don't properly recognise hate crime. I can call to mind a case that was absolutely homophobic, and there was clear evidence that it was a hate crime, but the magistrate said, I don't believe this is a hate crime, but it's such an awful crime, I'm going to raise the sentence anyway. So we got the result in terms of justice, but of course it wasn't recorded as a hate crime. So there's a lot of stuff there that really needs to be tidied up. But I think in the end, we will tackle this by everybody working together. And I have to say that victim support in North Wales is really good. We have a victim support centre that was initially funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that has thousands and thousands of referrals every year. And rather like Debbie's service, people can latch on to that for as long as they need it.
Perhaps it would be good to hear a bit more from victim support. You haven't really talked about your services yet.
Thank you, Lisa. I think one of listening to everybody else's discussion and conversations, I think maybe one of the most important things to put across in regards to victim support is that we are what's called a third-party reporting centre. And basically what that means is that people can come to us and report a hate incident or a hate crime. And we can do various things with that. If they want us to, we can report that to the police on their behalf. If they just want the police to know about what's happened, but they don't want to take it any further, we can also forward that information on to the police. We can listen to what's happened to them, and they may decide that they want that recorded with us, but at the moment they don't want to do anything. People can remain anonymous when they report as well. I think it's really important to mention here because Chris was talking about difficulties experienced possibly by the deaf community with reporting. So it's important to let people know that we do have a service whereby people can either email or they can fill in an online reporting tool, and we then have interpreters that can be brought in to actually make sure that we're able to speak to everybody, and that goes for people whose first language is not English as well. Obviously Welsh, we have Welsh speakers as well. I think I think for some people, obviously, what we would say at victim support is in an emergency, you need to dial 999 and call the police. And if you feel comfortable, report your incident or crime, to the police on 101. But for some people, victims do tell us that there are barriers to that as well. So, for example, one of the ones that I've heard very recently is that they didn't feel that the police understood enough about being trans to make sure that they didn't out them to other people in the process of the reporting and in the investigating as well. They also have reported to us that when they've contacted the police, that the call handlers perhaps don't understand all of the protected characteristics, and they've had to explain themselves. So again, that was especially around trans and explaining to somebody what transphobic hate crime might be, which kind of didn't fill the caller with confidence. And often people say they're, scared of wasting police time because these incidents happen so often to them that it's only when something more serious happens that they feel like they can actually report to the police. In those kind of cases, we would encourage people to actually report. And as I say, if they don't feel comfortable going to the police, then come to us. The other thing that we do, and a lot of people aren't aware in the first place that they can come directly to us, that often they think the police have to refer them to us. So what happens is we have a dedicated hate crime team that's based in South Wales, although some of us do work in North Wales. And the call comes through to our hate crime team, and then we have victim care officers who handle the call. They're all fully trained in hate crime, so there isn't that, they have a better understanding than most people do about different protected characteristics. And we also have caseworkers. So in North Wales, we have a caseworker. And we also have emotional support volunteers who work with us as well. So some of the things that we can actually do in terms of support, and I should add that you can actually get support from us without actually reporting the crime. So it doesn't mean the crime has to have been reported through to the police. You can still get support. I think Jenny Ann just mentioned that you can have that for as long as you want. We are a victim-led organisation. So our caseworker can provide things like advocacy. If sometimes a victim doesn't know what's happening with their kind of incident or their crime, and our caseworker can liaise with the police. She also liaises with housing as well. We provide, as I've probably said already, one-to-one support. Usually in non-COVID times, that's face-to-face, but at the moment it's still either over the phone or via Skype. That could change, obviously, at any time. So we also have what we call Beyond Crime workbooks that our caseworker will work through with people, and they're about things that people experience after crime. So, for example, working through insomnia, for example, or managing anger after people have experienced a crime. And we find that is quite often an issue because people people are angry that their identity has been attacked, and that can kind of really affect who somebody really is and their whole identity. We can support victims with personal safety, so things like supplying personal alarms. We also provide home security, so things like window locks, dummy CCTV systems. We signpost people for Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority. I've lost my words, compensation as well. And we work with different organisations and communities to raise awareness of hate crime. And that's really why I'm in post. So that's the main bit of my post, which is quite broad, actually, because as I've said before, it covers the whole of North Wales. And, we've got a lot of, I think although, yes, we have, we've made significant kind of changes over the years in terms of hate crime. I still think we have a lot of awareness raising to do.
I think there's a lot of awareness raising and a lot of linkage to do. And I guess I'm kind of hoping that one of the things that might come out of this panel, apart from encouraging people to come forward to one of the agencies if they need you, and understanding the way that these crimes can affect people. I think I'm hoping that perhaps even the panelists will start to make more links between you, and maybe Mario can have a chat outside of this as well as what's been happening here with Glitter, with the Deaf Hub. Maybe you can talk to people about the services you provide. Maybe people will be able to come forward to your agencies, but also hopefully, I think, better liaison all round in the community about these issues would be really useful.
I just want to, just so that the public are aware, we do work very closely with victim support. So they refer people to us. And again, if someone's been a victim of crime, we'll refer them back for support. And so that does happen. There are other things that we can do. So, for example, like it seems like we're all fighting for people's hate crime referrals, people to come forward to us instead. It's like we're on commission. But if people do come directly to the police, it doesn't mean that we have to. It doesn't mean that we would take action without the victim's input. So if they didn't want, for certain reasons, for us to take certain action, we can look at other options we have, and we'll always discuss that with a victim. So we like to be called victim focused and victim led. The other thing we can do, the only reason we wouldn't be able to do that with the victim is if there was a threat, risk, harm or vulnerability reason that we would need to take action because the risk of harm is greater than, treading on someone's toes or making something. So we obviously don't want to make anything worse. But we are victim-led, so if anyone comes forward, we will take we're led by the victim.
I think it's probably a really good thing that people have a range of choices for who they can talk to, but it is also important that people have as much confidence in the police as possible. Yeah. And I know that's harder for some communities than others, but it's good for people to have all of these choices. But in terms of getting redress, you're the ultimate agency.
Yeah, like you say, we have links with a lot of other agencies, Balzo, we also, the Welsh Refugee Council, we're very close to them, so they can refer to us. There is obviously a lot more we can do, and like you say, any of the services, if you see a way of us linking in with you, coming to your events, getting involved, just raising awareness that, like a lot of the panelists have said, the police in this country, luckily, have come a long way in the last 30 years. And we know that people that come into the country from other countries, their understanding of what the police is and their experiences with the police are very different to just general public in this country. So yeah, encourage people to come forward, but if there is a way that we can, things can always be improved, basically. So if there is a way that we can link in, and that's my role. Part of my role is the hate crime officer role, but it's also I'm an engagement officer. The end result is we want everyone that is a victim of crime to report it, because that builds a picture, that gives us the information and intelligence we need to then get search warrants or, make arrests and then put people before the Crown Prosecution Service. But yeah, any way we can link in, we can work together, just let me know.
Before we finish, and we haven't got much longer, I do want to return to something we had earlier in the discussion, and that's restorative justice, which a lot of people don't know about. Is there anybody here who has experience around restorative justice and can talk about it? Jenny Ann.
Yes, as I said earlier, our group is very keen on restorative justice, because one of the things we found in the hate crime research project was there isn't a very good understanding of why the perpetrators do it. And in restorative justice, the person comes to terms with the crime and often meets with the person who suffered the hate crime. I don't want to call them a victim, I want to call them a survivor of the hate crime. And by being able to tell the perpetrator the effect it had, many of them don't understand just what a deep and long-lasting effect it can have. As because lots of us said at the beginning, it's an attack on your basic identity. One of the things, too, I don't think is well understood is the way intersectionality works in hate crime, where people have more than one protected characteristic. I'm sure Rahim is very aware of the fact of being from a different ethnicity and LGB piles on that effect. And we've seen people from some communities, particularly those from the autistic community and from some of the minor ethnicities, have actually, as Rahim had to do, denied their LGBT because they don't want the double impact of perhaps being with a learning difficulty and being gay or trans. And that effect really the perpetrators do not understand. And in the end, we want everybody to just be reasonable and live with everybody else, because we're all human beings and we're all trying to live a reasonable life.
I know that, Rahim, I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I just want, Chris, you've had very little to say so far, but I'd really like to hear from you about what you think about those issues of intersectionality around disability issues.
Can you, for me, I need to know the full word. Intersectionality, is it?
The fact that you might be attacked or the victim of a hate crime for being deaf as well as for being gay.
As well. Okay. The problem at the moment with the deaf community, there's a great deal of visual signs, quite animated. I'll give you an example. I went to the pub and deaf see or you're gay, because of the way you do sort of accentuate how you communicate. That's a difficulty. I feel that is not enough resources. I think that's basically for deaf people to access things. For example, victim support, email means that the deaf person can't see that person. Zoom, you can see, but email is difficult. Yeah, and if you have an interpreter there to facilitate that conversation, it would make life easier. Like school as well. there's not enough for deaf education at all. You know, supporting LGBT.
Oh, sorry.
You know, school and stuff like that is very, very difficult.
I have a feeling that Zoom is going to take a large part of our future meetings and conversations online. It's happening already because of COVID. I want to come to Rahim because you're bursting to say something and have been for a bit.
No, I wanted to ask. Actually, I wanted to ask her about. There's a term for deaf phobia.
Deaf phobia. Are you asking? Is there a term?
Yeah, there is a term.
You're breaking up now and again, so I'm missing some of the words. Go on, Rahim, again, please.
There is a term to define the deaf phobia, and to say that it's really real.
No, I've never heard of that.
Because I've heard of it.
You have you, Rahim?
Yes, I have deaf friends. And I explained once that I was scared to interact with a deaf person, and they said the word to me.
Yeah, Chris has never heard it, and as an interpreter, I haven't either.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway,
different communities.
But I wanted
go on, Rahim.
But I wanted to say about what. Sorry, I forgot his name.
Chris, is it?
Mario. Sorry, Mario.
Oh, Mario.
Because he was talking about reaching out to the community and talking with the LGBT community, and Debbie actually talked about something very important, which is a lot of the LGBT community, especially the asylum and refugee community, are scared to report, because the first thing we come here to the country, we should not make disruption, we should not make problems, and we should be nice, and we should never talk back, basically, and basically just shut up and sit down. And
where did you hear that? Where do you get that message?
No, not from the police. Not from the police. I'm not saying that from the police. I'm saying that from the community, that working from everybody, working with refugees or asylum seekers, or from the other asylum seekers and refugees who've been here, because they were saying that if we made trouble, it's going to affect our case, or it's going to affect us getting the nationality after the refugee status, the 5 years. And that really creates a lot of tension, and people are scared to come and report, because they feel like if they went to the police, they think they are the problem. They created the problem for just being and for just existing. And I think if all the organizations and all the civil societies are worked together to just change this mindset, it's going to be really easy. And one of the problem as well is a lot of the communities, the LGBT community, like I said, are put with their community from the same origins and same countries, and that creates a lot of tensions, and people are back to their closets. And of course, if you are in the closets, you cannot report a hate crime based on your sexuality, because you are afraid that that's gonna out you. And I mean, there is a lot of layers and layers and layers. And Debbie, you talked about access to therapy and talking with a specialist. We do that at Glitter as well, as we have a little bit of funding, and we are trying to pay for therapy sessions and talk with a counselor and all that. But the problem here in Cardiff, there is almost none BAME counselors and therapists. especially who are also LGBT. So because as a person of color and as a North African, I feel like if I'm gonna go to see a white counselor, for me, I have to explain to him my culture first, and to explain, like you said, what is the honor crime, and to explain everything. This is only the first session, and that's gonna be on my expense. And then we're gonna talk about the real problems. So when we are trying to look for BME counselors, it is rare here, and sometimes we have to book counselors in London and have phone calls with our attendees, but unfortunately it's so hard. It's so hard. And Lisa, you said about raising awareness. Glitter Cymru, unfortunately we are not a charity, so our funds are very limited, but we are doing a lot of outreach with the society, whether we're going to be white allies or straight allies, and we do like glitter talks that we are raising the awareness about what the struggles of the BME community, and also trying to give a platform and amplify the voices of the BME community. We never seen a policeman come into these events, unfortunately, but hopefully in the future.
Well, just let me know when they are.
You have each other's number, as they say. We're pretty much up on time, but I want to go to Trudy for the last word, because I believe it was Victim Support that had the original idea of this panel, and I think we should thank you for that, and ask you to have the last word.
I'm afraid I can't take the credit for that, but I'll receive the thanks. Thank you very much. I just wanted to reiterate that we do provide interpreters. I'm not sure if there was, if that was completely understood. But in the same way that we had to book Olivia for today, if we want face-to-face via, and we do use Skype, so if we wanted to use that, we would need to book an interpreter. But I think that's would be the case with most organisations. So I just wanted to reiterate that we do have that service.
Does anyone else
deaf or any language?
Yeah, both, I think.
Raheem, yes, in any language, as far as I know.
Jenny Ann.
Yes, one thing I just wanted to highlight is here in North Wales, we do have some ethnic communities. For instance, quite a lot of our health board nurses are from the Filipino community, and they're very good. They come to the police meetings and they organise their own internal support. And I think that's a very good way of doing it. There was one other issue I did want to raise that we haven't talked about, and that's rural hate crime. So, for instance, along the coastal strip in North Wales, most people have some understanding of LGBT, but in the rural areas of the 6 counties, very often the people have no understanding of LGBT and absolutely none about people seeking asylum or coming from other countries. So again, it's really education. I think sometimes they're racist or homophobic or transphobic by default, not because they want to be. And it's teaching them how to approach the communities. And I think sometimes as community members, we have to be resilient and just say, that's not how you do it. Can I explain the way you approach me?
Okay, and this is going to be the last word, Trudy.
Yeah, I think following on from that, Jenny Ann, one of the things that Victim Support, one of the parts of my role is to try to recruit people who we call hate crime leaders. And they are people within certain communities who perhaps already have gained the trust of that community because they're within it. And they can help us, therefore, to get into that community and build relationships, can help us with with training those people, and having that person from within that community makes all the difference, as I've said, because that relationship is already built. And yeah, our hate crime leaders help us with disseminating information, help us with awareness, and really that's what the hate crime leader role, it is a voluntary role, that's what it's designed to do. And when we do get hate crime leaders, which you know, if anybody's interested in this, please get in touch with victim support. Yeah, we do find hate crime leaders really very useful to us, so thank you.
And for anyone who's interested in that, or in any of the other groups who've had representatives here talking today, and in helping out with anything, with any of the community groups or the services, there will be details, I think, at the end of this video, and certainly on the Pride Cymru website, in order for you to be able to reach the groups who've been speaking here today. I want to say thank you to all of you for being here and doing this. This is going to go up online and stay up online, and hopefully people will be able to use it into the future to ease themselves into maybe reporting a hate crime or helping to prevent hate crime in future. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Pride Cymru.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.